Shalom, dear friends. Welcome to my channel, where we talk about the true wisdom of life, inspired by the eternal teachings of the Torah and Tanya. Today, I want to share with you a story from the heart of Brooklyn, about the strength of a man, about falls and rises, about how the soul overcomes despair. This is not just words. This is a parable that can change your life, just as it has changed the lives of many others. If you like it, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you won't miss new videos with deep reflections and meaningful stories. And now, let's dive into this story. In the heart of Brooklyn, where the streets are filled with the aroma of fresh challah from the bakeries and the echo of prayers from small synagogues, lived Rabbi Avraham Stein. His home on King's Highway was modest, but full of books, from ancient volumes of the Talmud to modern treatises on ethics. Avraham, a man in his 60s with a gray beard and eyes full of wisdom, often sat at his wooden desk in the library, lit by the soft glow of a lamp under a green shade. His son, young Yaakov, had just returned from a yeshiva in Jerusalem, where he studied Torah under the blazing sun of the Holy Land. Yaakov was full of questions, as any young man on the threshold of adult life would be, and that evening, over a cup of tea with honey, he asked his father, "Dad, what truly makes a man strong? Not money, not power, but what inside?" Avraham leaned back in his chair, his fingers turning the pages of an open book. It was the Tanya, the sacred text he knew by heart. "My son, the strength of a man is not in muscles or a loud voice. It is an inner quality, born from the struggle with oneself. Remember what is written in the Tanya. Who is a hero? The one who conquers his animal soul. A man who controls his impulses, anger, envy, fear. That is the truly strong one. He does not let the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, lead him astray. Instead of shouting, he influences through his presence, through his example. People respect him not out of fear, but out of natural reverence." Yaakov nodded, sipping his tea, and the air in the room filled with the aroma of spices drifting in from the kitchen, where his mother was preparing gefilte fish for Shabbat. "And how does such strength come about, Father? Is it from birth, or from life itself?" Avraham smiled. "Life shapes it, but the root is within. Take, for example, a story I heard from my teacher back in yeshiva. There was a merchant in old Vilna named Levi Goldberg. He imported fabrics from Poland, and one day the customs office confiscated his entire shipment. When he found out, Levi fainted from the shock. After all his savings were tied up in those rolls. His family feared for his life, so they went to the local tzaddik. The tzaddik said, "Tell Levi that they confiscated his fabrics." It turned out there had been a mistake. They had taken the goods from another Goldberg, who dealt in furs and for whom fabrics were nothing serious. The tzaddik knew. The Almighty never sends a trial that the soul cannot endure. Levi could not have survived such a loss, so it simply could not have been his misfortune. The conversation flowed like the Jordan River, full of twists and turns. Avraham continued. "A strong man has priorities. He doesn't waste time on trifles, but he notices details when they matter to the bigger picture. And there is no pride in him. He knows that everything comes from Hashem. God gives wealth not for an extra car or a trip to Miami, but for Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world." Yaakov pondered this for a moment. "But are strong men always rich?" "No, my son. Strength lives in sages, in rabbis, in those who influence souls. But if strength is present, it must change the world for the better." Suddenly, outside the window came the sound of street vendors closing their stalls for the night, and Avraham fell silent, gazing out. "But what if a trial breaks even the strong? What then?" Yaakov asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. Avraham turned, his eyes darkening. "My son, true strength lies in action, but sometimes even heroes fall. And here is what happened next to that merchant." But the conversation was only beginning. Yaakov could not stop. The questions burned in his soul like fire in a menorah. Avraham, seeing this, went on, though now his voice grew deeper, like an echo from the past. "For sometimes, to understand strength, one must remember those who have fallen. Yaakov set his cup down on the table so abruptly that the spoon clinked against the saucer. Outside, night had already fallen. The street lights of Brooklyn flickered on one by one, casting golden reflections on the wet asphalt after the recent rain. Silence settled over the room, broken only by the ticking of the old wall clock, the very one that once belonged to Avraham's grandfather, brought from Odessa. "Father, you said heroes fall too. What did you mean?" Yaakov's voice became quieter, almost a whisper, as if he feared awakening something dangerous in his father's words. Avraham slowly rose, walked to the window, and looked down at the street where a group of young men in kippot hurried toward the synagogue for mincha. "You see, my son, even those who conquer their animal soul 1,000 times may stumble on the 1,001st. But falling is not the end. It is a test. Take me, for example. 20 years ago, when I had just begun leading the community here in Brooklyn, we faced a great scandal. One of our wealthiest benefactors, Chaim Rosenberg, a man who built schools and fed the poor, suddenly lost everything. His business collapsed in the Wall Street crisis. He came to me at night in tears and said, "Rabbi, I can't go on. It's over. I have let people down. I have let myself down. I have let the Almighty down." Avraham turned to his son. In the dim light, his face looked as if carved from stone. I looked at him and thought, here is a man everyone considered strong, and now he is broken. But I asked him, "Chaim, what do you feel right now?" He answered, "Pain, fear, shame." I said, "Good. Feel it, but don't stay in it. Ask yourself, what next? How do you get up? How do you help those who were counting on you?" He left that night without answering, and a week later he came back, this time with a plan. He sold his last house, opened a small bakery on Flatbush Avenue, and began giving bread for free to those who were hungry. He would say, "If I can't give money anymore, at least I can give warmth." Yaakov listened without taking his eyes off his father. "And did he become strong again?" Avraham nodded, stronger than before, because he understood true strength is not in never falling, but in rising every time you do. Each time you stand up, you conquer the animal soul anew. It whispers, "Lie down, give up, you are nothing." But the divine soul answers, "Get up, you have a mission." His father sat back down, took the Tanya book, and opened it to a familiar page. It is written here, "The greater the soul, the stronger the animal inclination. Great people face great battles. That is why the Almighty sends them great trials, but never ones they cannot bear. Remember what the Rabbi used to say. If it feels heavy to you, that means you are capable of carrying more than you think." Yaakov thoughtfully ran his finger along the edge of the table. "And women, father? You always say that behind every strong man stands a woman. Even when he falls, she lifts him up?" Avraham smiled for the first time that evening, warmly, almost mischievously. "Oh yes. Your mother, may her memory be a blessing in paradise, once told me, 'Avraham, you can be as wise a rabbi as you want, but without me you'll forget where your glasses are and when to eat.' And she was right. A woman is not just help. She is a mirror. She sees what a man himself does not notice, and if her soul is strong, she will not let him drown in self-pity." At that moment there was a knock at the door, quiet but insistent. Avraham frowned. Who could that be so late? He stood up, opened the door, and on the threshold stood a young man in a wet coat, his hands trembling. "Rebbe, I need help. My father, he just lost everything, and he says he no longer wants to live." The knock at the door interrupted them like sudden thunder in a quiet night. Avraham opened it, and there stood a young man whose eyes spoke of sorrow deeper than any words. This was the moment when theory met real life, and the story continued. The young man stepped inside, shaking raindrops from his coat. His name was Dovid, about 25 years old, thin, with burning eyes and trembling lips. He sat on the edge of the chair Avraham had pointed to, and immediately began to speak, as if the words were scorching his throat. Rebbe, my father is Mordecai Levy. He owned a chain of small kosher grocery stores all over Brooklyn. Everything was going well. People respected him. He gave tzedakah generously. He supported yeshivas. And then, inflation hit. Suppliers raised prices. Big chain competitors crushed him. He took out loans, thinking we'd get through it. But yesterday, the bank took the last store. All that's left are debts and empty shelves. He came home, sat in his armchair and said, "David, I'm no longer a man. I've let you down. I've let Mom down. I've let the community down. It would be better if I were dead." Avraham listened in silence, without interrupting. Yaakov stood against the wall, arms crossed. He felt awkward being present for someone else's pain, but his father's glance told him to stay. He doesn't eat, doesn't speak, just stares at the wall. I'm afraid to leave him alone. Rebbe, tell me what to do. How do I bring back his strength? He always taught me. A man is someone who gets up after falling. And now he himself is lying on the ground and won't move. Avraham placed a hand on David's shoulder, heavy yet warm, like a father's. My son, your father hasn't lost his strength. He's simply forgotten where it lies. Strength isn't in stores, isn't in money. It's in the soul. And the soul is a spark of the Almighty. It doesn't go bankrupt. He turned to Yaakov. Please bring the Tanya from the shelf. Open it to the chapter on the divine soul. Yaakov quickly found the book and opened to the right page. Avraham began reading aloud, quietly, but each word fell like a stone into still water. The animal soul screams, "You've lost, you're nothing." But the divine soul whispers, "You are the son of the king. Your mission is not over." Mordecai has forgotten that whisper. He needs to be reminded. David lifted his head. But how? He doesn't want to see anyone. He barely even recognizes me. Avraham paused in thought. Outside the window, the wind rocked the street lamp, and shadows danced across the walls like old memories. You know, David, I had a similar case about 10 years ago. A man named Shmuel Cohen lost everything in a fire. His warehouse with goods burned to the ground. Insurance didn't cover it. He came to me and said the same thing. I'm a finished man. I didn't comfort him with empty words. I said, Shmuel, come to me tomorrow at 6 in the morning. We'll go together. Where? David asked. To the market, where they sell fish at dawn. We bought the cheapest fish, cleaned it together in my wife's kitchen, and I told him, today you are not a rabbi or a businessman. Today you are a man who feeds the hungry. We delivered that fish to the homes of the poor in our neighborhood. At first he was silent. Then he cried. And a week later he opened a tiny takeout stall with kosher food. He said, I realized, as long as I can give another person even a piece of bread, I am still alive. David listened, holding his breath. And will my father be able to do the same? I don't know, Avraham answered honestly. But I do know that the Almighty never closes one door without opening another. Sometimes the door is small, unnoticed. Your father has always been generous. Maybe now is the time not to give money, but to give himself. Time, warmth, a word. Yaakov, who had been silent until then, suddenly spoke. Dad, what if he doesn't get up? What if he really decides? Avraham turned sharply to his son. Don't say that. No one has the right to decide for the Almighty. Life is a gift, and only the one who gave it can take it away, and we are obligated to fight for every moment. He stood up and put on his coat. David, let's go to your father, right now. I'll talk to him, not as a Rebbe, as a man who has fallen and risen himself. David jumped up, hope flashing in his eyes. But at that moment, Avraham's phone rang. A late call, unusual. He looked at the screen and frowned. It's from the hospital. They say, Mordecai Levy has just been admitted. An attempt. He tried. The room froze. Avraham grabbed the car keys. Yaakov and David rushed after him. The door slammed shut, and the night of Brooklyn swallowed the three of them. They didn't hesitate for a second. The car sped into the darkness toward the hospital, where the thread of life hung by a whisper. In the corridors steeped in the smell of hope and fear, Avraham knew everything was being decided right now. The battle for Mordecai's soul was only just beginning. Avraham's car raced through the wet streets of Brooklyn, headlights slicing the night like knives. The rain grew heavier, drumming on the roof as if trying to drown out their thoughts. Dovid sat in the back, clenching his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. Yaakov, beside his father, remained silent, only occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror to catch Dovid's reflection. They burst into the emergency entrance of Mount Sinai Hospital, a familiar place where Avraham had been called many times, to comfort, to pray, to remind people of life. The corridor smelled of disinfectant and coffee from the vending machine. The nurse, seeing the rabbi in his kippah and black coat, nodded immediately. "Mr. Levy is in room 312. He's stable, but the doctor said he's unconscious after an overdose of sleeping pills. The family is already here." They rode the elevator up. The door to the room was ajar. Inside was dimness, only the green blinking of monitors. Mordecai lay on the bed, pale, tubes in his arms. Beside him sat his wife, Rivka, a small woman with gray strands escaping her headscarf. She wasn't crying. She simply held her husband's hand and whispered psalms. Seeing Avraham, she stood and embraced him like a daughter embraces a father. "Rebbe," he said to me before, "I'm no longer needed. I'm nobody. How could I not have noticed?" Avraham sat on the chair by the bed and took Mordecai's other hand, cold and still. "Rivka, you did notice. You're here. And that already means so much. A woman always sees deeper. She is kenegdo, opposite, but precisely because of that, she is help. You've been his support all these years. Now it's time to remind him who he is." Dovid stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Dad, forgive me. I should have been there more often. I thought, you're strong, you'll always manage." Avraham turned to the young man. "Dovid, that guilt is the animal soul speaking too. It loves to blame so it doesn't have to act. But the divine soul says, now it's your turn to be strong for him." He leaned toward Mordecai and spoke quietly but firmly, as if the man could hear through the coma. "Mordecai, my brother, I know you can hear me. You've always been the one who fed the hungry, who built bridges between people and the Almighty. The stores, that's not you. Money, that's not you. You are a soul that came into this world to do Tikkun Olam. You fell, yes, but falling is not the end. Remember what the Tanya says. The soul descends in order to ascend higher. Your soul is low right now, but it is from here that it will rise even stronger. The Almighty didn't give you this pain to break you. He gave it because He knows you can endure it. And when you wake up, and you will wake up, because you have a wife, a son, a community, you won't return to the old life. You'll begin something new. Maybe a small kiosk with books. Maybe Torah lessons for those who've lost faith in themselves. But you will give, not goods, but hope. And people will say, "Look, Mordecai Levy got up. So can I." Rivka wept quietly, not from grief, but from relief. Dovid dropped to his knees by the bed and laid his head on his father's hand. Yaakov stood in the doorway, feeling a lump rising in his throat. He had never seen his father like this, not as a teacher, but as a simple man fighting for another's life with words. Suddenly the monitor beeped faster. Mordecai's fingers moved, weakly but clearly. Rivka's eyes widened. He squeezed my hand." Avraham smiled through his exhaustion. "You see? The soul heard. But this is only the beginning. The struggle isn't over. Now we all have to stay with him, every day, every hour." He stood and looked at them all. "I'll stay until morning, and you? Go home, rest. Tomorrow will be a new day, and in it, a new chapter for Mordecai." But as they stepped into the corridor, the doctor approached Avraham quietly. "Rebbe, the tests, he took too much. We did everything possible, but it's 50-50. If he doesn't wake by morning." Avraham nodded without flinching. Then we will pray until morning and beyond, because as long as there is breath, there is hope." He returned to the room, sat by the bed, and began quietly reciting Tehillim. Outside the window, the rain was easing, but the night was still far from over. The night seemed endless, but dawn always comes. Avraham prayed, the family waited, and then, in the rays of the morning sun, something happened that reminded them all. Miracles occur when faith is stronger than darkness. The finale of this parable is about awakening. The night dragged on forever. Avraham sat by Mordecai's bedside without closing his eyes. He recited Tehillim in a whisper, fingering the olive wood beads, a gift from a pilgrimage to Tzfat many years ago. Rivka dozed in the chair, her head resting on Dovid's shoulder. Dovid hadn't left his father's side for a moment. Yaakov brought coffee from the machine, bitter but hot, and now stood by the window, watching the sky over Brooklyn slowly brighten. The first ray of sunlight slipped through the blinds, laying a golden stripe across the white sheet. Suddenly Mordecai sighed, deeply, with a rasp. Everyone startled. Rivka jumped up first and grabbed her husband's hand. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. His eyes, cloudy, lost, scanned the room. He saw his wife, his son, the rabbi, and began to cry. Not loudly, quietly, like a child who has finally found his way home. "Rivka, Dovid, I thought it was the end." His voice was weak, cracked. Avraham leaned closer. "No, Mordecai, this is the beginning. You've returned. The Almighty brought you back. Now tell us, what do you feel?" Mordecai closed his eyes, gathering strength. "Pain, but something else too, like light inside. I heard you, Rebbe, your words, about the soul, about the mission. I thought, I'm nobody without the stores. And then, it was as if someone said, you are my son, and that is enough." Dovid squeezed his father's hand. "Dad, we're with you. We'll open anything. A little book kiosk, courses for those who've lost faith. You'll teach. You've always known how to speak to people so they stand up again." Rivka wiped her tears. "And I'll be right here, as always. Remember how you used to say, a woman is not weakness, she is strength opposite. I am opposite you, Mordecai, and I always will be." Avraham smiled, tired but sincere. "You see, everything we talked about yesterday with Yaakov, that is life itself. A strong man is not the one who never falls. He is the one who rises, who masters the animal soul that whispers, give up, who remembers, the soul is a spark of the Almighty. Ein od milvado, there is nothing besides him. And as long as you breathe, you can do Tikkun Olam, repair the world, even in small steps." Mordecai nodded weakly. I want to live. I want to be useful, not with money, with myself." The doctor entered, checked the monitors, and smiled. "A miracle. The vitals are stabilizing. 1 or 2 more days under observation, and you can go home. But you were very lucky, extremely lucky." Avraham stood up and embraced Rivka and Dovid. "Thank you both for not giving up, for calling me. Now it's your turn to be strong together." The 3 of them, Avraham, Yaakov, and Dovid, stepped out of the room. The Brooklyn morning was fresh, smelling of wet asphalt and fresh baking from the nearby bakery. Yaakov turned to his father. "Dad, yesterday you said a strong man dreams of fulfilling his potential. What do you dream of?" Avraham looked up at the sky, where the sun had already risen above the buildings. "I dream that everyone I meet remembers, inside them is infinite strength, that no one ever thinks they are nobody, that the world becomes better, one person at a time." Dovid smiled for the first time in 24 hours. "Then let's start with my father, and then with everyone who needs it." They walked down the street, shoulder to shoulder. Somewhere in the distance, a melody began to play. Someone rehearsing, Siman Tov Umazal Tov on the violin. Avraham stopped, listened, and said quietly, Mazel Tov, brothers, Mazel Tov to a new life. And the sun lit up their backs, 3 men who had understood. True strength is not in never falling, it is in always rising. Together. That's the parable, my friends. It teaches us, true strength is within, and it comes from the Almighty. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. How do you conquer your own animal soul? Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's together do Tikkun Olam. Shalom, and until we meet again.